Hello and welcome back to the NBA DFS Slate Breakdown for December 19th. We got Thursday, big boy slate, a ton of teams playing. We're going to go over both FanDuel and Draftkings. We will go FanDuel first because that covers all the games, which means we cover the entire slate for both sides. We'll dig into it, but first, I'm your host, Tyler Wiemann, at FlatTyler83 on your DFS sites and on Twitter. Now come join us at LineStar. $39.99 per month gets you access to all we do, the props, the DFS, for all sports we cover on both the website and the app. Now, let's dive in and get to it because we got a big slate here and a lot to get over. So 11 games on DraftKings, 13 on FanDuel, and there are some key spots that we really need to talk about. One, Scotty Barnes is questionable. If he plays on FanDuel, he's at 3,500. We have him at 29% owned right now. He's going to be 90% owned. Super high owned, but this is one of the rare situations that I would have probably 100% of them. So I generally don't go 100 on anybody ever, but this is one of the rare situations that I would absolutely do that. Now, he is questionable, so he might not play. And if he doesn't, we got to rearrange our Toronto exposure and look at things again there. But that is one of the main things I want to point out on this FanDuel slate. The other one is the Dallas situation. We'll dig into that when we're going through guards a little bit more. So let's just dig in position by position, starting at point guard right now. And we got Cade Cunningham, 21% owned, going the highest owned. And I think he should be. He's in an absolute great spot. Jaden Ivey is not going to play. And without Ivy, he just crushes, and he's been on a hot streak, and he's in a good matchup versus the Utah Jazz, who are 28th versus the point guard. Cade Cunningham just has to do everything on this team. He's in a good spot, could potentially go for a triple-double once again. I got to love me some Cade. I'm going to have plenty of him. Jordan Poole, 7,200, 21% owned versus the Charlotte Hornets. There's no Kyle Kuzma. So with that, and Brogdon likely still limited on minutes. He's going to get the ball in his hand quite a bit. He's been playing big-time minutes lately. So at 7,200, I don't hate it. We see a ceiling in the 50s. He's got there. My only issue is you don't really see many 40-point games from him. You see high 30s or you see 50s. Now, 30s isn't going to get it done in his price. We're going to need that 40 plus. And while it can happen, I think that the field is saying it's more likely than it really is. So I'm going to have some Jordan Poole, but 21% is probably a little too high for me. Kyrie Irving, 8,100, 5.2x. He is questionable, but Luka is out. So I think the most interesting thing here with the Dallas Mavericks is what they do this with their starting lineup. If Kyrie's in versus if he's in or out, and even if he's in, still what they do. So the reason being, I think there's a couple things they could do. They could have Spencer Dinwiddie start at point, Kyrie being at shooting guard, or they could go Kyrie at point and Grimes at shooting guard, or Kyrie at point and Dinwiddie still at shooting guard. But I think that's just lessening his skills, and it's not the optimal setup. Now, point guard versus the Clippers is a very tough spot, but shooting guard gives it up a little bit. So I do think where he starts is important. He's like a 1.2 fantasy per minute guy without Doncic on the court. If you look at our team defense tool over the last 20 starts versus point guard, it's like a minus 0.19 fantasy point per minute spot for the starting point guard. So Kyrie's in that spot. It may hurt him a little bit. He's going super high owned. I am absolutely going to have a ton of him because without Doncic there, the ceiling is those 60 burgers that we can see. And I mean, he's able to hit mid 40s with Doncic. So I definitely am fine playing Kyrie. I just want to bring up the spot that we're not totally sure what they're going to do with the starting lineup. If it's Grimes, if it's Dinwiddie, and all across the board there. But it is an interesting one to pay attention when we come closer to lock and just understand kind of those moving pieces. Kyrie is in a better spot if he is starting at shooting guard. Obviously, the team defense is going to be trying to key in on Kyrie wherever he is at. But over the last 20 games, Dallas is worse versus the shooting guard than they are versus the point guard. Worse versus the point guard than they are the shooting guard. So just understand that. And then obviously Grimes, Dinwiddie are both very interesting, and we will talk about them. Ben Simmons, 5,800, likely starting at point again like he did last game. He played 31 minutes. If he's playing 31 minutes, he's a little interesting, but his price is up there, so I don't absolutely love it. Going to get a little bit, but not a ton. Now, let's go to some pivots. Dyson Daniels, 7% owned, 6,900. We've seen big time ceiling on him. The worry here is his value is really tied up in blocks and steals, and when he's getting them, he has a high ceiling. When he's not, it's not the greatest spot. And the issue here is if you look versus shooting guard, the Spurs have been pretty good about taking care of the ball. Only 1 steal a game, 0.3 blocks a game to the starting shooting guard. Now, Dyson Daniels is extremely good, so, maybe he's still at 2.5. But for him to really get there, he's got to get, 6 steals, 4 steals and a block. All of his big time outings are those big time steal number type outings. And this doesn't profile as a game that he could get, 5-6 steals, something like that. So that's one thing to consider here. But if he does it, I think he's going low owned and has a huge ceiling. Spencer Dinwiddie, 4,200. I like him if not in the starting lineup. Either way, I think he is very interesting. He's going to get some minutes. And then if Kyrie's out, he's going to play huge minutes. So I'm interested. I think he gets 24 to 28 minutes if he's coming off the bench. And if he's starting, probably 28 to 32, something like that. So I'm interested in Dinwiddie. Going to have plenty of him regardless if he's starting or not. James Harden on the other side of that, 9,400. I am shocked that he's going low owned right now. The guy has been playing incredible lately. Everybody talks about how it's a throwback to his Houston days, but hey, he is the team and playing big time minutes. I am absolutely fine going here when the opponent isn't quite as good as they normally are. They can totally stay in this game, and when they stay in the game, he plays big time minutes, 37, 38 minutes. With the upside and usage he has, it's just a great spot, and I'm going to get to some Harden. Next, we got Jordan Clarkson, 5,300 versus Detroit. I think it's interesting. His first game back, close game, and he plays 31 minutes. Blowout versus the Clippers, he plays 23. It's the Detroit Pistons. This game should stay close late into the game. I think there's the possibility of Clarkson playing, 30 minutes, and at 5,300, this is a guy that's a 1.02 fantasy per minute guy over the last 20 games. So I am absolutely interested in him, and I think he is going way overlooked right now. His median projection should be higher, and only 3% owned. Give me some. That is a game environment that I like. We already like Cade Cunningham. You have Cade and Clarkson, together, and there's a huge ceiling there, and the Clarkson aspect cuts a ton of that Cade high ownership stuff out. So very interested there. Then we got Kobe White, 6,700 versus the Celtics. Look, it's not a great spot versus the Celtics, but Giddey is questionable and I believe actually unlikely to play. If he is out, then Kobe White looks way more interesting. I think his minutes are more secure. You're looking at 35, 36 minutes and just the ball in his hand more. Zach LaVine also looks much more interesting in that situation. Now, let's get over to DraftKings and shooting guard over here, point guard on DraftKings. Kyrie Irving, Cade Cunningham, both look good. We talked about that. Ben Simmons, 5,400. He's a little cheaper over here, so definitely interesting. Jordan Poole, 7,300, 18% owned. I think he should be slightly lower owned, and that'll do it. So let's get over to shooting guard on FanDuel. Jordan Poole, Kyrie Irving, Devin Booker. I think Devin Booker's in a fine spot. I don't mind getting to some of him. I am getting to a little bit more KD than I am Booker, but really either of those guys can get to it and go nuts. Malik Beasley, 5,400. His price is up a little bit. I don't mind getting some. It's the game environment that we like. Close game. He should play a lot of minutes, and I'm fine going here, but I'm not going to go super heavy on him. The ghost of Tim Hardaway passed. If he gets hot, he can get there. We haven't seen a single hot game out of him. His usage isn't going to be that high. It's only Ivy out, but I'm willing to take a couple shots. I just don't think he should be 15% owned. Quentin Grimes, I'm going to have a ton of if he is starting. If he doesn't start, I still expect, 24, 26 minutes, and I'm fine getting to some of him in that spot as well. But I would probably try and limit how much of Grimes, Dinwiddie, and Irving I have on the same team, as I do believe they will eat into each other's minutes a little bit. And pivot here, Brandon Miller, 7K versus the Washington Wizards. When we have higher paced games with poor teams like Hornets, Wizards, Pistons, Jazz, I always kind of gravitate to those spots a little bit more, and Brandon Miller has been playing big-time minutes and can really fill it up. So I'm interested going to him at 7K. We know he has a big ceiling, and he's in a good spot. Clarkson White, we talked about, so we will move it on over to shooting guard on DraftKings. Kyrie Irving, Malik Beasley, Quentin Grimes, all of which we have talked about, but I will touch on Klay Thompson here. Klay is one of the Mavericks I am interested in. He just went nuts versus the Warriors, but without Doncic, maybe plays a few more minutes, and if the shot's falling, then he can do well. I mean, he's only 4,900, and he's been around the 30 spot a ton this season with a 40 burger in there and a 50. I'm fine taking some shots on Klay. If he gets it rolling, he can definitely crush the slate. And small forward on FanDuel, Scotty Barnes, just absolute free square if you're on FanDuel. If he plays, don't overthink it. Unless you hear that he's on like a 20-minute limit or a 18-minute limit, then pull up. But as long as he's playing 26, 28 plus minutes, I'm probably going to pretty much lock him in. Cam Johnson, 6,700, 17% owned. The thing that I think is so interesting about Cam Johnson, without Schroeder and Cam Thomas on the court, he's like a 1.12 or 1.8 fantasy per minute guy. So he's got a big boost this year without those two guys on the court. They're not going to be on the court all game. So I think there's some ceiling here. While I do think that number is slightly inflated by only a sample size of like 140 minutes or something, it's something I still think we can rely on and at least use that to show us that there is a reason to still take him at these prices. We've seen a ceiling out of him lately. I'm going to take some. Raptors aren't that great. This is a game that the Nets can stay in, and I'm interested in it. Absolutely. Devin Booker we covered the Pistons. Now pivot time, Herb Jones. There is no Brandon Ingram, and he's been playing big minutes without BI on the court. Solid D. Fine going here at 5,300. He has a ceiling. He's another guy that does need some steals and some blocks to really get it going here. But I'm fine having some Jones at 5,300. I think he is a solid player and going to play big time minutes. KD, 9K. 1.17 fantasy per minute on the season. 1.27 over the last 5 games. Beal should be back, but it's still, the offense goes through KD and Booker, and I think KD is just in a better spot here than Booker, so that's why I have more KD. Small forward on DK, Malik Beasley, Quentin Grimes. We haven't really touched on, or we did touch on Beasley. Grimes, we touched on. Jason Tatum, 10.1K. I have a hard time playing 10K versus the Bulls. While they aren't a very good team, I just think most likely they blow them out. However, I do have to bring up the fact that, 20 days or so ago, they played the Bulls. He played 36 minutes. The Bulls kept it close, and he scored 66. So there is that chance that the Bulls are able to keep the game close. And if they are, then Tatum starts to look interesting. But it is one of those situations where if I'm playing Tatum, I am probably going to pull somebody from the Bulls side with me, just because I think the way he gets there is he gets there because the Bulls are able to stay in the game. All right. Power forward on FanDuel. We got Scotty Barnes, Ben Simmons, Victor Wembanyama, Cam Johnson. All right. So Wemby, 17% owned. That's probably right about where I'm going to be. There's so much value on this slate that it's easy to fit Wemby in, and he has a huge ceiling. While I don't necessarily think he gets 70, 80. I think his most likely outcome is mid-50s or 60s, which he's done versus them before. While that's good at 11.3K, it's not going to win you a tournament, so I don't think he is a must-have. Thus, I'm coming around, the 17%-ish mark, but I like Wemby. Just don't want to go overboard. It is a good game environment for him. There is the possibility for that big game, but just not going to go overboard. Herb Jones, we talked about. KD, John Collins, 7.2K. I think this game is just going overlooked a little bit on FanDuel for me, and I'm going to get some. No Isaiah Stewart. There is Jalen Duran on the other side, but John Collins just been playing really well. 1.16 fantasy per minute as a starter this season and has had huge ceiling games. Absolutely interested in him and will be getting some for sure. PJ Washington, 6,600. This is another spot that I just think is absolutely going overlooked. This run he had right here where he was just an absolute beast on the boards was without Luka. He once again does not have Luka. Also, just for you prop bettors out there, his rebound line is 7.5. I have laddered that up as high as I can. It was a very nice ladder during this last Luka time. He goes from like 10 rebounds per 100 up to mid-14s per 100 without Luka there. So he's going to be all over the boards. He gets more usage. I am absolutely going here and going to have a decent amount. And I think there's the possibility for, mid-40s type score from him in a decent spot versus the Clippers. So give me some PJ Washington. And on to power forward on DK. Tatum, DeAndre Hunter. DeAndre Hunter, 5,500. He's going to come off the bench and fire shots up again like he has all season long, playing solid minutes in a decent spot versus the Spurs. I don't mind if you want to get some. It is a little bit more of a filler spot for me. And the reason I say that is there's not a huge ceiling. There is a good chance of 5, 6x, but just a poor chance of 8x. And that's my only issue is I just don't really see him going to 40s. But he can definitely be useful at on a lineup to save a little salary. Miles Bridges, 6,200 versus the Wizards. He's played 25 and 28 minutes coming back from injury. If he gets a little bit more, he could definitely get it done. I want to see a little bit more minutes out of him, but we know that he has a huge ceiling when he gets it rolling. I'm fine with a little Bridges, but I do think 13% is a little bit much right now on this big of a slate. Now, center spot on FanDuel. Jokic and Wemby. Look, there's a ton of value. No surprise that these two guys are high owned, and I do prefer Jokic, just more consistent with that higher number and only 900 more. So I think it's easier to go to Jokic, but I'm not playing a ton of either of them. As I told you, I'm probably right around 17 for Wemby. I'm probably right around 10 for Jokic. And the only reason I'm higher on Wemby is because at power, you can fit him at power forward also. Now, let's get into some like players. Jalen Duren, 5,800, 9% owned. This is a spot we got to talk about because there's no Isaiah Stewart. It's also versus the Jazz. Last game, he played 32 minutes. It's something he hasn't been doing this season. He is on a pace for 24.3 minutes per game on the season so far, but came out and played 32 minutes. Without Stewart, there is absolutely that chance. Now, there's also a little bit of a concern for me because on the season, he's at a 1.08 fantasy per minute spot. That's how he's been playing this season. But without Ivy, without Stewart, he's at 0.85 fantasy points per minute. Not sure why the difference is so drastic with Ivy. It's really Ivy on or off the court that affects Duren so much. But that is something that's been happening. It is a smaller sample size, but it's something to consider here. So if you want to put, say he's at 1.08 fantasy per minute at 30 minutes, he's going to look really good. Put him at 32, he's going to look great. But if you put him at 0.85 or 0.9, then, you see a little bit of a struggle playing too much of him at 5,800. Regardless, I'm going to get some. And I'm probably going to be over this 9% because I think he's going too low owned for the ceiling that he has. He can hit 50s, hit mid 40s. We've seen it for years now, and we've seen it a few times this year as well. So I'm fine. I'm going to get some, but how much is the question right now? Another pay up option, Karl-Anthony Towns. It is the whole revenge narrative. It is a very tough spot versus Gobert and the Timberwolves, but I do feel like he's been slighted by them. He's consistently in, the 50s with 6 games of like 60 plus. So I am going to go here. I think 9,700 is still too cheap for him. While it's a tough spot, I have a hard time staying away when it's so easy to pay up for him. And most likely outcome to me is 50 plus for him, regardless if it's a tough matchup or not. I like myself some Cat. Maybe he comes in at higher ownership because of the whole revenge narrative. But at 5% owned, I'm going to be probably fairly aggressive on him. Now, getting over to the center spot on DK, we got Zach Edey, 23% owned. Now, we got to watch if he's in the starting lineup or not, but if he's not in the starting lineup, I expect only 22, 24 minutes, and at that, I have a hard time paying up super chalk for him. 10.7 for Wemby, sign me up. Day'Ron Sharpe is going to play a little bit off the bench. He played 20 minutes last game and crushed. He is a solid per minute producer, so if he is getting 20 minutes, he's going to show up a little bit. I'm fine getting a little. I think 16% on this big of a slate is a little much for how much he's going to play, but I'm interested. Jalen Duren, love it. Clint Capella at 5,300 is interesting. There is no Okongwu. So there is a chance or a path to him playing bigger minutes. They've been giving him big minutes if he is producing. And so maybe that high minute area where it's at like 28 for the season or so, maybe that high is now 32 instead of 28. And if he plays 32 minutes, he could absolutely give you a 40 burger at 50 points. So I think there's some past the Clint Capella, and he needs to be in your player pool and at least considered. So that'll do it for us today, guys. Big Thursday slate. There's only 3 games tomorrow, so I'm not going to do one of these shows, but I will be back next week, and we should be getting back into more regular NBA DFS shows now that the mid-season NBA BS Cup is done. Hope you guys have a good one. Good luck tonight. Let's make some money, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.